defining poverty. What is a poor person? The second topic is what's the limit? How much? When do I say? A bit like what you were saying earlier. When I get lots and lots of emails, if everybody demands my maser money, it stops being maser. It becomes like shlish, and then it becomes chetzi, and then it gets tricky. So what's the limit? And then the third topic, which really is mashlim, completes the first two, is how do we view the ani? Like how is he viewed in society? That's the third topic. Hakol Barur. Oh, you're so amazing. It's such a pleasure. You organise people. Okay, so let's start with to a definition of poverty. There are three ways of defining poverty. One is objective poverty, and that is below the subsistence line. Thank you. Below a line that you mama, I just can't feed myself. We can't survive. It's tragic when people work and are unable to, to maintain a household with their income. So that's one definition of poverty. A second definition of poverty is relative poverty, and that is I've got enough, but I've just got much less than everyone else. So if I live in a very wealthy neighborhood and my home is the size of I live like in an apartment in a place where everyone lives in these huge homes. So I survive. I'm comfortable. We manage to eat. We're doing fine. But relative to the people around me, I don't feel great, and I feel like we're missing something out. That's relative poverty. And the last one is personal poverty, and that is personal poverty. If I once had more and I now have less. You follow? So there's sort of a way you can measure poverty. The first one where there's a line, anyone that has below this amount can't afford to, close the month and pay all the bills and buy food. That's really the lowest level, objective poverty. Then there's relative subjective poverty compared to the people around me. And then the final one, the personal poverty, compared to myself. Earlier, I was previously doing better. Now, talking about this second one, this subjective poverty. So I will tell you about this very, very funny little, there was a study. I think it was in Harvard University. It's so interesting. It's relevant in 1,000 different areas, but here's one of them. They took a group of students and they asked them to choose between two options. Harvard is quite a good college. It's not Herzliya, but it's good. Anyway. So they took these students, and the students had to choose between one of two options. They were working in an office, and imagine that in the office, an imaginary office, you have 30 people, 30 staff members, and your boss calls you in as a representative of the 30 people. Your boss calls you into his office and says, it's time for the winter bonuses. At the end of winter, everyone gets a bonus. Bonus or package A. Package A is I'm going to give everyone in the office an extra 1,000 shekel, and I'm going to give you 1,500 shekel. Okay? So I would come out with 1,500 shekel. Option A. Option B is I'm going to give you 1,700 shekel.
Everybody else 2,000.
Yes. What did people choose?
They choose the 1,500 for themselves, the 1,000 for everybody else.
Exactly.
Because the only thing they care about is having more money than other people.
Relative poverty, exactly. It's important for me to have more than you. It's a very, very sad thing. Even if I had everything that I need, but I want to have more. Now, I would say in terms of our approach, it's sort of a Jewish approach. I think the first one and the third one are important, the middle one less so. The first one, obviously, objective poverty. Someone can't feed themselves. Obviously, we have an obligation to help them. The third one, personal poverty. Previously, I was doing better, and now I'm not doing so well. That's also can be a painful situation. I used to be able to afford to go out, I don't know, twice a week, and now I can't afford to go out maybe twice a year. That's difficult. When my standard of living has gone down, that's personal poverty. That's also tricky. The middle one, relative poverty, I think is less of a concern. Like we don't need to live in a society where everyone's got the same. That's more of like keeping up with the Joneses. Like if they've got a big car, I need to have a big car too. But that's less of a requirement. In terms of providing in the community, I would say objective poverty is obviously a concern, but also personal poverty is also a concern that the community should step up and help in. Is that clear?
It's just like, isn't relative poverty more of a modern problem that we have today? Like nowadays, people like in a developed country, right? Like Israel, like America, like in Europe, people have enough to eat, right? But like if you are like in relative poverty, you have like you're like worse off, and like you don't go to the same schools, like as good as schools. You miss out on many things. It's like it's kind of like connected to personal poverty, right?
Well, the truth, I'm doing fine. It's sort of connected to this new Western idea that I heard of a while ago of FOMO. Do you know what FOMO? Fear of missing out. It's a little bit like that. That's not. I don't think it's a particularly healthy approach. When I was in yeshiva, I used to encourage foji. Do you know what foji is? Foji is the opposite of FOMO. It's fear of joining in. Like that you might actually be doing something that everyone else wants to do, of inadvertently doing something that's popular. Okay. Let's have a look now at the sources. We'll start with the Psukim. The Psukim in the book of Devarim talk about how we should treat the poor. Obviously, the Jewish people are just about to enter the land of Israel, having lived for 40 years in a very, very equal society. Everyone had the same food. The clothes there were no labels, no designer labels at that time. Your clothes grew with you. But then, as we were about to prepare to enter the land of Israel, which would bring with it us looking for ourselves, there'd be more competition, perhaps a little bit more diversity. So, to prepare the Jewish people as they are about to enter the land of Israel, Torah tells us like this: Ki yeh b'cha evyon. If you have a person who is in a difficult situation, me'achad achicha be'achad sha'arecha, one of your brothers in one of the cities in which you find ba'artzecha, in the land of Israel, asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha, lo ta'ametz et levavcha ve'lo tikpotz et yadecha me'achicha ha'evyon. Do not hold yourself back from giving to them. Rather, now look at this, it's underlined. Ki fatoach tiftach et yadcha lo. Open your hand to him. And provide for him that which he is lacking. Now, I think we may have even discussed this in the past. Provide for him de machsoro. What is de machsoro? It is providing him that which he doesn't have. Now, the Gemara tells us in Ketubot the story that I have mentioned also of Hillel Azaken, that saw a person, לקח אני בן טובים אחד, סוס ורחוב עליו, ועבד לרוץ לפניו, פעם אחת לא מצא עבד לרוץ לפניו, ורץ לפניו 3 מילים. Hillel Azaken himself. He was a person that had previously lived a more affluent lifestyle, and previously was able to afford an entourage. And now, Nebuch, he didn't have enough money for an entourage. Can you imagine getting into your car without having like 3 motorbikes in front of it?
Yes, I can.
What would I do?
Oh no, it's unbelievable. Anyway, so here was a poor chap who was exactly in that situation. But it's odd for us and difficult for us because we never had 3 motorbikes in front of us. But if I always had 3 motorbikes, or then some horses, whatever it was, I had in front of me, then it would really hit me hard when they weren't there. You follow? That's why it's so hard for us to know when someone else is in a difficult situation. You know what I mean? Because you might look at them and say, wow, things are going great for them. But we don't know. Maybe 10 years ago, things went far greater for them. And I can never know the pain that somebody else can be suffering. Hillel HaZaken was acutely aware of this. And therefore, in his obligation of providing for this person who had fallen on hard times, he made sure that not only did he have a chariot that he was used to, but even to make sure that he had an entourage. And when the entourage wasn't available, he himself, Hillel HaZaken, provided the entourage, and that was a kiyum of the mitzvah of tzedakah. Isn't that amazing? Okay, that is that. Now, after that, let me go to, I want to share with you from the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch, this is from Parashat Kedoshim, talking about the mitzvah of Peah. Do you know Peah? Which is we leave the corners of the fields. We have Leket, Shikha, and Peah, 3 different types of produce that were left in the fields for people who were in a tricky situation. And in reading this statement that we will read in a minute from the Sefer HaChinuch, we will be aware that the translation of the word tzedakah into English, charity is not a good translation. Tzedakah is from the word tzedek, justice, which means they're entitled to it, which is unusual because I normally think of they're not entitled to it. It's my decision to give it to them, right? And yet there's something about me giving to somebody else that isn't just me acting out of a good heart, but there's something about right. This is what needs to be done. The money that happens to be in my property this minute actually belongs to him, and I'm returning it to him. Yeah, exactly. I'm basically a shaliach, and the wealthy person just has an opportunity of performing a mitzvah, and he should be grateful to the poor person that I have this opportunity of performing the mitzvah through you. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. Now look at what the Sefer HaChinuch says. Mishor Shia mitzvah. As I mentioned in the past, Sefer HaChinuch, almost every mitzvah in the Sefer HaChinuch is discussed in 4 areas in the Sefer HaChinuch. It tells you what the mitzvah is, number 1. Then it tells you pratei mitzvah, that is the details of the mitzvah. I mean, if we're learning Shabbat, it doesn't go into all the laws of Shabbat or into any mitzvah. It doesn't really go into the full details, but it just gives you the headlines of this is how this mitzvah is performed. Shorshia mitzvah is the meaning of the mitzvah, like the essence of the mitzvah. And then the 4th section for each mitzvah is when does it apply? Does it apply in Israel, outside of Israel, in all time, during the time of the Beit HaMikdash? Different regulations. Okay, so the most interesting chapter for this particular mitzvah, for Peah, this leaving stuff in your field, is the Shorech Shah mitzvah. What's the essence of this mitzvah? So listen to this. It's really very nice. Hashem Baruch Hu, God, Ratzah lihiyot imo asher bachar me'utarim b'chol midah tova v'yirkara v'shiyeh lahem nefesh bracha v'ruach nediva וכבר כתבתי כי מתוך הפעולות תתפעל הנפש ותהיה טובה ותחול ברכת השם בה. ואין ספק כי בהותיר האדם חלק אחד מפירותיו ושדהו ויפקירם ושיהנה בו הצרכים, תראה בנפשו שובע רצון ורוח נכון ומבורך. וכי השם יתברך השביעו בטובו וגם נפשו בטוב תלין. He's saying, he writes it so beautifully. The Hebrew is really lovely. He says that Hashem wants to train us to give. The act of giving is a very satisfying opportunity. When I give tzedakah, to be a giver, as we discussed last week in our Musa piece, to have the zechut of being able to contribute to somebody else, to invest in somebody else, is a very satisfying thing to do. It's a great zechut. And he writes on and he says, there's no doubt that if I make, when I reap my field from its produce, he says, obviously, Hashem has given me more than I need in that field. Did you see that? Ki b'hotir ha'adam chelek echad miberodav b'sadeo v'yafkirem v'yanu b'tzrachim. He says, Hashem could have given everybody everything that they need. So why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu create a way where everyone should get, 40? So instead of giving everyone 40, this one gets 120, that one gets 70, this one gets 20. But then you have this opportunity of getting to know somebody else, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave his produce in my field, and now the opportunity of returning his produce to him. Isn't that a lovely way of looking at the mitzvah of tzedakah? I'm going to remind you, it's a lovely story. I'm sure I've told you it before, but it's this the pleasant, the enjoyment in giving. When he writes this, it reminds me of this campaign done, I think it was by a charity called Yad Eliezer here in Jerusalem, that provides food for families who are not blessed with enough. And they give these very generous Mishloach Manot packages. Did I tell you about these Mishloach Manot packages? So the way they do it, Mum, it's so beautiful. You'll love this. They used to, when they give out your Mishloach Manot package, you get a box that divides into two. You rip it, and then there's identical, produce in both halves. And do you know why they do that? Because when they give to you on Purim, they give you your Mishloach Manot, but then they give you a Mishloach Manot that you can then give to somebody else. Isn't that amazing? So I can have the pleasure of fulfilling the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Isn't that brilliant? Yeah. But it's not miles away from the way that the Sefer HaChinuch is describing my excess. When I have excess, it's just HaKadosh Baruch Hu has decided to put his fruit in my field and given me the opportunity, the satisfaction of giving him his fruit. You follow? That's how I should view the mitzvah of Peah. Is that clear? Okay, B'Seder Gamor. Until now, part one, defining poverty and really our obligation to give. Is that any questions on point number one? Okay, point number two is, I want to talk about the limitations, the limit. It's a great joy to give him fruit, but I give him the corner of my field. If I were to give out all of the produce in my field, so then I would be, HaKadosh Baruch Hu planned on me having some of it. You follow? I'm not just HaKadosh Baruch Hu's shaliach to provide potatoes for everyone else in the town. I'm also providing potatoes for myself. So if I were not to keep for myself, that would be taking it too far. I'd be missing the point of the mitzvah of tzedakah. You follow? That's why, as going back to what I said a few minutes ago, it's not charity, it's tzedek, justice. You follow? Yeah. Meaning they deserve, it belongs to them. But for me to give everything away would almost I'd misunderstand what tzedakah is. You follow? Because I would view it as just, my benevolence. Well, the more I give, the more benevolent, benevolent. Oh, you're such superstars. The more benevolent I am. Did I get that right? Oh, good. Mm-hmm. So the more I give, the kinder I would be. So for the more, I want to give more and more and more, but it's not that. It's tzedek, it's justice. This part belongs to me, that part belongs to him. If I give it all away, then it's not mine to give away. You follow? Yes. Eov.
Like giving everything as tzedakah, I think it's wrong, because you need some for yourself. It's doing justice to yourself.
Exactly. If I were to give away, I think it's me, the benevolent giver, giving to everyone around me, rather than justice. This bit belongs to him, that bit belongs to them, that bit belongs to me. You follow? It's not. I'm not the tzaddik giving out to everybody. I have this opportunity of, returning stuff that really belonged to them from the beginning. Is that clear? It will be almost missing the point at tzedakah if I were to give everything, because that's not justice. Make sense? Okay, I want to read two things. One of them is in English, an essay from a chap called John Robinson that I enjoyed, and then the Rambam, who says something different, something very, very similar. Would somebody read the English? Thank you so much, Michael.
Luck, duty, and benevolence, John Robinson. We can prevent people from dying by giving money for their relief. Therefore, we should give. This is an obligation of justice, not a matter of charity.
Brilliant.
Singer's conclusion is that the rich should give for the relief of the poor up to the point of marginal utility. That is, my giving should not stop until the suffering I am inflicting on myself and my dependents by directing resources towards the world's poor balances the suffering that the poorest are experiencing. In these terms, paying $20 per week for my child's piano lesson is unjustifiable, since that money could be better used in relieving extreme suffering. Not only should I give up more frivolous luxuries too, as well as many worthwhile ones, but I should also devote every spare moment formerly used for leisure to the same ends. Janet Narveson calls this view the ethics of the hair shirt, and points out on Singer's terms Beethoven should have been helping the peasants he depicted in the Pastoral Symphony instead of wasting time on composing tone poems about them.
The line at the beginning is really, really very, very good. It's an obligation of justice, not a matter of charity. It's a little bit about my mindset. When I'm giving charity, I'm not the giver, like the benevolent giver. That's not my role in it. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the giver, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me my portion, and he's also given me somebody else's portion. So it's my responsibility to take my portion for me and to give that person their portion. You follow? It's an act of justice rather than of like loving kindness. That makes sense? Sounds cruel, but it's very, very important. So otherwise, I'll just give everything away. Now look at the Rambam. The Rambam says something very, very similar. Le'olam lo yakdish adam v'lo yachrim kol nechasav. You're not allowed to give everything away. Fa'oseh ken over al da'at hakatuv. And if you were to give everything away, you would be misunderstanding the mitzvah of tzedakah. Why? Because the Torah says you should give mikol asher lo. Mikol asher lo v'lo kol asher lo. You have to give from your property. You don't have to give all of your property. K'mo she'amru shebi'arnu chachamim. Bi'aru chachamim. Ve'ein zu chasidut ela shtut. Sharehu ma'abed kol mamona v'yitzarech livriyot. If I give to such an extent that I enter financial insecurity, so then I'll then be dependent on other people. ואין מרחמים עליו, ובזה וכיוצא בו אמרו חכמים, חסיד שוטה, מכלל מבלי העולם, the חסיד שוטה, this, I think I'm being pious, but I'm actually being foolish. These people lead to the destruction of the world. אלא כל המפזר ממונו במצוות, anyone who invests in mitzvot, al yefazer yoter michomesh. You should never give more than 20%, 1/5. 1/5 of your property is a reasonable amount for you to give to tzedakah. Were you to give more than 1/5, then you would be misunderstanding how halacha works. Is that clear to everybody?
Yeah, question. What if I make, let's say,
I know you're.
Right?
So I don't
100
think.
million. I say I need like 10 million for my jets and my kids and all to go to the best college in the world. And the other 90 million, like what I do with
That's
them.
right. Yeah. Excellent question. Yeah, I imagine the Rambam would agree with you in that case. I think he's talking about people on a sort
Like
of
people,
but in general, again, today the world isn't like this. In general, my property is a reflection of my needs. Nowadays, you can have super wealthy people where the amount of money that they own is way beyond, sort of P100 of the amount that they might ever need for themselves. That level of wealth that exists today, I don't think the Rambam had that in mind. Yeah. A sort of how my wealth has to be has to be a function of my lifestyle. You know what I mean? They're very wealthy people that could lose $1 billion and it would have no impact on their lifestyle because their lifestyle is. Does that make sense to you? Yes, I think you're quite right. In that sort of situation, the Rambam would not be talking to them. But I think what the Rambam is addressing is the vast majority of people for whom my income and my lifestyle are very much intertwined. You know, the majority of my income is invested in maintaining my lifestyle. And the concern is if I were to give away more than 1/5, that would have an impact on my lifestyle. Does that make sense to you?
What about giving that's not part of tzedakah? Let's say like a gift, birthday present, or I don't know, anything else that doesn't fall under tzedakah. Would that still be considered losing?
No. I don't think he's talking about that here. He's talking about my commitment to give tzedakah. A birthday present to a friend is not a commitment to give. No, that would not be included here. I think he's not talking about that my net gifts shouldn't exceed 20%. He's more saying my responsibility to those people who are less fortunate.
Because if I give a present, I give something. I get something back.
Well, because it's not an act of tzedakah.
For example,
When
if
you
I
give a
paid
present.
Aliyah Torah, I paid like 20,000 shekel. It's not really tzedakah because I paid. I get something back.
Ah. Oh, that's interesting. That's a good question. When you pay to do a mitzvah, that's more complicated. That's a good question. I don't know what to say about that. In general, the money that's collected does go to the upkeep of the Bet Knesset.
So just a small side question.
I think that could be tzedakah.
Can you use Meiser for Achnasat Kala to give to
Yeah,
couple?
sure. Yeah.
Like they don't.
But it depends. But you have to make it clear there's a maaser. I can't buy the wedding present using my maaser money.
Right, it has to be like.
Yeah, but if I was buying something like a chas, if you go to a wedding.
If you would sell it flat out, the aliyah, you can't do it on Shabbat.
What if it's like a matafa envelope?
Just making a commitment to it.
It depends. Depends who you get. Yeah, it depends who. Sometimes when you pay for a wedding, they're doing fine. They don't need my present. I'm often a wedding present is a luxury that I'm giving to a couple.
Right.
So if I'm giving them a luxury, it'd be hard to justify using my maaser money to provide them with a luxury. But if there are people that collect for Achnasat Kala. If there's a couple that's struggling to start their household, and your gift would help them, build their household, that would be Achnasat Kala. I know there was this couple in London, very, very wealthy family of the Khatan, and a very, very wealthy family of the Kala. When they got married, their first home was double fronted. Like you have a door, and then it's like a detached home. That was their first home. They really, Baruch Hashem, doing very, very well. And I remember my mother talking with a friend of hers who was going to the wedding. What can I possibly buy them? What do they not have? So in that situation, obviously there wouldn't be any. You couldn't use your maaser money there. But unfortunately, there are couples that are struggling to be able to start their married life, and that definitely would be you could use maaser money for that. Okay, everything clear until now. What we're going to do now, this is such an important piece from Rabbi Sachs. And we're actually going to see it there, and then we'll see it also in the Shulchan Aruch. Let's read Rabbi. Would somebody like to read Rabbi Sachs?
I can read it.
Thank you so much.
Wealth and poverty, a Jewish analysis. Precisely because its whole moral code is orientated towards compassion, the Bible uniquely found it necessary to command, "You shall not favor a poor man in his cause." Compassion, the substrate of judgment, must not distort judgment. The preservation of impartiality, the balance of claims, the reciprocity of or rights and obligation, the interdependence and of apparently opposed interests are values essential to the Jewish procedure. These are the characteristics that are often summed up by saying that Judaism is a religion of law. I prefer to describe it as a rule that moral passion must yield to moral rationality if it's to achieve its ends.
Excellent. I'd say that last line by Rabbi Sachs, I think it's such a profound statement. Do you see that? Moral passion must yield to moral rationality if it is to achieve its end. Now, sometimes, often when people are collecting money, that's a very powerful tool. The passion, they like pull on your heartstrings to have you to give. But you mustn't let your moral passion overcome your moral rationality, and then you end up going beyond your limits, because then you won't be able to. Society won't be able to cope with that. You follow? So at some stage you have to say no. At some stage you have to say no. Your moral passion has to yield to the moral rationality. You follow that? My moral passion is, how could I not intervene? How could I press that button? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's my moral passion. And let this child die. How can I see that and not give $10,000? How could I not do that? That's my moral passion. When I see others in pain and it's a wonderful thing, I stick in and I have to do something about it. But my moral passion has to be sort of, what's the word, like a guarded or protected or held back. Tempered, good word, thank you so much. Has to be tempered by my moral rationality. I have to pull it back, because if not, I'll be a pauper in a year, because I'll just give away to everybody. Does that make sense to you? So if my moral passion doesn't stir me, then I haven't got a soul. But if it controls me, and don't let the moral rationality kick in, then that's also a disaster. Does that make sense to you? The easiest way, I think, to look at it is to understand that tzedakah is not charity. I am not the benevolent giver in the tzedakah situation. You follow? What's happened is HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given out everything that everybody needs, and every once in a while he's given something that Shlomi needs, and it happens to be in Reuven's house. So Reuven takes that thing from his house and brings it to Shlomi. You follow? That is the mitzvah of tzedakah, tzedek. But it almost belongs to him. You follow? Now you need to have the eyes to realize that it happens to be in my home, but it belongs to them. But if I start emptying out my house in total, then I'm missing the point. Because it's not me just giving to everybody, but it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who's decided that he's given me a bit more so that I have the opportunity to give to people who have less. But if I give everything away, then I think it's me who's giving rather than HaKadosh Baruch Hu who's giving. You follow what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Okay. That's Rabbi Sachs's point. I want to make one final point. Okay. This is in the Torah. The Torah twice tells us about not looking favorably on a poor person over, if there's a din, and Reuven, the millionaire, is suing Shimon, the pauper. You follow? So a judge might say, well, Shimon, poor Nebuch, he hasn't got anything. So I'm going to rule in favor of Shimon the pauper rather than Reuven, the millionaire. That's charity. That's not tzedakah. Tzedakah is you have to give people what they deserve. You follow? So in a case, in a court case, in a court case, you have to give both of them equal judgment. That's why the Torah tells us twice. Vidal, somebody is weak. Lo tehedar b'ribo. You shouldn't, lift him up. If there's a din, if there's a beit din decision, the financial situation shouldn't determine whether A should pay or not. The question is, what are the facts? Who lent and who lied or who stole? And then based on witnesses and what happened, you decide what the right thing to do is. The Torah tells us further, Lo tasu avel b'mishpat. Loti sapane, you don't lift up the person who is, has less money. Velote dapane gadol, but tzedek tishpot amitecha. Do you see that? You have to judge with tzedek. Tzedek is you have to do the right thing. Tzedek, from the word, same root obviously as the word staka. I'm going to leave the Shulchan. The Shulchan Aruch goes into some detail, but I'm going to summarize by saying, in Judaism, in the sources that we've looked at until now, the obligation to give to other people, the mitzvah of tzedakah, is a mitzvah that I perform with my mind as well as my heart. If it was only done by my heart, then I would feel like the benevolent giver in the scenario, and I'm not the benevolent giver. The benevolent giver is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like we saw in the field, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has decided that Reuven's potatoes are in my field, and therefore I leave the corner, and then Reuven picks up his potatoes from my field. But it's not an act of righteousness on my part. It's just that's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to divide things around people. Does that make sense to you? Likewise, in a court case, if somebody is not doing well, you need tzedek, you need justice to be done. Compassion is a wonderful thing, and we're Baruch Hashem, we're all blessed with a neshama, which is what makes our compassion so strong, and which makes all the dilemmas every time there's an appeal. That's what makes them so powerful to us and make us so much want to give. But it's important that we never go beyond our limits. If we were to go beyond our limits, the Rambam talks about 1/5. But you're right, for the halavai, we would ever be in the situation where Bill Gates was studying this Rambam. It could be different for him, but the vast majority of us, the Rambam makes perfect sense that my lifestyle has to reflect my, the amount that I give has to reflect my lifestyle. And if I end up giving up too much, then I would give up on a bit of the lifestyle, which would not be a good thing. So I want to bless us all that we should understand the tzedek that is in tzedakah, and when we understand the tzedek that is within tzedakah, we'll manage to give to the right people at the right time and give them the right amount. Yishar koach to all of you.
Can I be